Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about a new topic. It is the 18 levels of hell in Buddhism, terrifying realms of retribution. Firstly, we will start with the concept of hell in Buddhist cosmology. In the vast and intricate tapestry of Buddhist cosmology, the realms of existence stretch beyond the grasp of ordinary human perception, encompassing not only the blissful domains of celestial beings and the cyclical rebirth of humans and animals, but also the terrifying and karmically consequential death of Naraka, commonly referred to as the Buddhist Hell. Unlike the internal damnation described in certain Western religious traditions, the hells of Buddhism are not fixed places of everlasting punishment, but transitory realms born from the precise mathematics of karma, where beings experience the echoes of their own misdeeds with visceral clarity. These realms do not exist as permanent abodes, but as conditional manifestations, energetic dimensions of suffering into which a being may be reborn based on the weight and toxicity of their unwholesome actions, especially those driven by hatred, violence, cruelty, and delusion. The 18 hells are not merely metaphysical constructs, but serve as moral cartography for the soul's perilous journey through samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, each hell illustrating a particular distortion of human behavior, taken to its furthest extreme and mirrored back as raw experiential consequence. Rooted in the ageless text of the Agamas, the Pali Canon, such as the Sutta of the Wise and the Foolish, these dreams were not envisioned to frighten believers into blind obedience, but to awaken them to the urgent necessity of moral discipline, mindfulness, and compassion. These hells are populated not by internally cursed souls, but by beings who, through the force of karma, must undergo a process of purification through suffering until their negative karma is exhausted, at which point they may rise again into the higher realm. Time in these hells is measured not in human years, but in vast cosmic cycles, where a single day might span millions of years on Earth, and the duration of suffering is determined not by the whim of a deity, but by the exact momentum of one's past actions. The imagery of demons, fiery rivers, forests of swords, frozen wastelands, and mountains of iron are not meant as literal landscapes alone, but as simple depictions of mental and emotional states made manifest, psychological torments crystallized into environment. In these teachings, the ultimate authority is not divine vengeance, but the self-operating law of moral causality, wherein every thought, word, and deed plants a seed whose fruit must inevitably be reaped. Therefore, Naraka stands not as a realm of holiness, but as a testament to the profound ethical architecture of the cosmos, where justice is not imposed but earned, and where liberation remains internally possible. Even the darkest hell, obviously the hell of no interruption, is not a final destination, for even there, in the heart of unspeakable suffering, the possibility of eventual rebirth and redemption glimmers faintly, like a hidden jewel in the void. In this vision of the cosmos, fear is not the final message, rather wisdom, compassion, and the liberation of all beings from suffering are the driving principles. To understand the 18 hells, then, is not to become obsessed with punishment, but to become soberly aware of the moral consequences that flow from the hurt of own sentient action, and to cultivate a life of mindfulness before the abyss jaw open. This journey into the infernal realms is not undertaken to gawk at horror, but to grasp in vivid clarity the hidden gravity of our actions and the boundless compassion of the Dharma that seeks to free even the most tormented spirits from the wealth of suffering. The first chapter is the first level hell, the hell of crossing stone. At the very threshold of Naraka lies the first level hell, known in many Buddhist texts as the hell of crossing stones, a place where the echoes of one's violent return with bone-breaking vengeance. This realm is reserved for those who, in their human lives, committed acts of brutal physical aggression, murderers, torturers, or oppressors who relished in causing bodily harm to others. The entrance to the first level is not a gate, but a descent, an unseen slipping into a subterranean abyss where the very ground is alive with malicious intention. The torrent is a grim expanse of just black rock and blood-soaked earth, lit by the faint glow of molten veins running beneath the surface. Here, towering mountains of sharp granite loom in eerie silence, and yet within that silence lies the mechanism of karmic retribution. In this dream, souls are bound and placed between colossal slabs of stone, massive monoliths that hover with preternatural stillness before suddenly crashing down with unthinkable force, reducing flesh, bone, and sinew into a pool of agony. The screams that follow do not rise, they sink, swallowed by the weight of the stones and the psychic pressures of unrelieved pain. Death is impossible, for the crossed are instantly restored, only to endure the torment anew, over and over, for spans of time and defy mortal comprehension. There is no reprieve, no moment of stillness in which to reflect or hope, only the cycle of pain, alteration, and reconstitution, each iteration fueled by the echo of harm inflicted in a former life. Demonic attendants, cruel and emotionless, observe this cycle with the detachment of cosmic accountants, ensuring that no suffering is made, no torment unearned. Yet, even in this place of terror, Buddhist teaching in this that the torments are not purposeless. They are purgative, meant to exhaust the karmic residue of violence, so that the soul might eventually rise again to God a realm where learning, change, and compassion are possible. The crushing stones of first level are not those external objects, they are the solidified weight of guilt, the embodiment of violence made physical. Those who suffer here are not condemned by divine wrath, but by the mirror of their own actions. As such, the lesson of the first hell is clear and terrifying. Violence reverberates, and the force used to harm others becomes the force that shapes the soul's darkest prison. The memory of this dream clings to survival through future lifetimes, etched into their consciousness a deep aversion to cruelty. The first hell is the first station on a journey through the dimensions of moral consequence, a reminder that all actions return, and that in the architecture of Buddhist cosmology, the state is both intimate and inescapable. The second level hell is the hell of the rolling stones. Second level hell in the Buddhist cosmology is a terrifying continuation of karmic reckoning, a descent not merely in space but in spiritual degradation and suffering sharpened by intention. Known as the hell of the rolling stones, it is reserved for those whose past life were marked by malice, deception, and deliberate cruelty, those who delighted in manipulation, broke sacred truths, or use their intelligence to bring suffering upon others for personal gain. Unlike the crushing inevitability of the first hell, Roruva is defined by chaos and unpredictability, where massive boulders, blackened, glowing, and inscribed with the scenes of the damned, hurtled from every direction across an endless wasteland of shifting obsidian dunes. These stones are not moved by nature or gravity, but by karmic momentum, each one charged with the moral energy of cruelty return. Souls within Roruva are stripped of all defenses and forced to flee endlessly across burning terrain, the feet dead and bleeding, their limbs flailing as they attempt to outrun the thunderous, grinding doom behind them. When caught, and they always are, the bodies are crushed under the immense weight of this stone. But unlike in the first hell, there is no moment of pause, no breath between destruction and revival. In Roruva, pains is layered upon pain. Victims are flattened, then peeled from the stone by hell beings wielding iron hoops, only to be thrown back into the field where the chase begins again. Each impact is not only physical but spiritual. The soul recoils as memories of inflicted suffering rise unbeaten with every blow. Demons known as the rope wielder lie the edge of this hell, not to punish but to ensure that no stone deviates from its mark, that every consequence finds its source. The horror of Roruva lies in its precision, its merciless application of karmic law. Not a single cry is unheard, not a single wound uncounted. Yet, even within this storm of violence and retribution, Buddhist doctrine maintains the hidden mercy of impermanence. The suffering will one day end. When the weight of misdeeds has been fully exhausted, the soul will move on, change sacred, yes, but awaken to the futility of cruelty and the sacredness of compassion. Until then, Roruva remains a place where those who once threw metaphorical stones, judgment, betrayals, manipulations are forced to do their literal return over and over as the internal chase through fire and stone breaks arrogance into humility and ego into dust. The third level hell is the hell of burning flames, Samhata. In the third level of the Buddhist hell, known as Samhata or the hell of burning flames, the torments inflicted upon sinners escalate to a horrifying extreme, where both body and mind are pulverized in a cycle of fiery agony and ruthless destruction, reserved for those who committed several karmic offenses such as mass killings, cruelty without remorse, wanton destruction of life, and acts driven by sadistic pleasure or deep malice. This infernal realm is surrounded by towering, living walls of flame that burn with karmic fire, not fueled by wood or oil, but by the boundless evil accumulated through malicious action in the human world. These flames do not merely sear the flesh, they enter the marrow, scorching the very essence of the soul. Sinners who enter this realm find themselves hurled into massive chambers, where gigantic demonic crushers, shaped like iron cylinders with gnashing teeth, descend from above and below, grinding their bodies into a pulp before restoring them instantly to repeat the torture anew, again and again for immeasurable periods of time. The ground is forked from black iron and glows red hot with molten lava, constantly shifting beneath the feet of the damned, forcing them to stumble into rivers of fire and vast pits where the flames scream like sentient beings, as if mocking the pain. The air is thick with the stench of burning flesh and the screams of countless millions, layer over one another until sound becomes a suffocating weight on the mind. Demonic wardens, monstrous and merciless, strike with burning spears and clubs, laughing as they crush scrolls and impale bodies, their weapons glowing white hot from continuous use. Some of these demons have hundreds of arms, each bearing a different instrument of torture, swords, hoops, hammers, all glowing with spiritual fire that sears not only the body, but the very karma stream of the victim. One of the most terrifying features of Samhatam is its chamber of karmic reflection, where the soul is forced to experience the full spectrum suffering they cause in life. Each murder, each moment of inflicting agony now endures from the perspective of the victim, down to every cry, every pleading glance, every heartbeat haunted in fear. This psychological torment blends with the physical until the boundaries between pain and memory dissolve, creating a realm of complete despair. Time in Samhatam is not measured in years, but in eons, tens of thousands, even millions of lifetimes may pass before the karmic weight is even partially lifted, and many souls will be reborn into lower forms of life, such as insects devolve a leaf, or humans doomed to lifetimes of suffering and isolation. Yet, within this horrifying prison, this remains one distant hope. If through the overwhelming torment, the soul still genuine remorse and manages to awaken even a faint thought of compassion or hear the whispered name of a Buddha echoing from realms beyond, a seed of redemption may be planted, allowing the possibility, however remote, for even to escape from this merciless inferno and return to the path of enlightenment. The hell of crushing by swords is the fourth level hell. The fourth level of the Buddhist hell is known as Kokura, the hell of crushing by swords, where karmic retribution is exacted through endless mutilation by plated weapons in a landscape soaked with the blood of the damned. This hell is reserved for those who in life committed grievous acts of violence, betrayal, deceit leading to death, and those welfare and intentional destruction of truth and harmony, especially those who used their souls, positions, and influence to cause the downfall and suffering of others. Unlike the fiery torment of Samhata, Kokura's agony is cold, metallic, and relentless. A rim where blessed, not flames, deliver dusty. The torrent of Kokura is a dark, desolate wasteland littered with broken weapons, shattered bones, and rusted armor, the remnants of past torment. From the moment a soul is cut into this level, the sky darkens to the permanent dust, and swarms of ghostly plagues begin to rain down, slicing flesh from bone with supernatural precision. Each soul is surrounded by an army of phantom warriors, manifestations of their own violent karma, who mercilessly attack with swords, axes, and spears, cutting them into pieces only for their bodies to regenerate and the process to begin anew. Demonic soul leaders, towering in form with skin like forked iron and eyes burning like coals, stalk the land wielding massive cursed sword inscribed with ancient rules of pain. These plagues are not mere tools of punishment, they are spiritual weapons that penetrate beyond flesh and into memory, slicing open the sinner's consciousness to expose the darkest truth they try to forget. In some regions of Kokura, the souls are hung upside down On plated trees, their back flying open by winds made of needles, while others are blurry off to their necks as flaming swords fly from the sky and impale them in synchronized stride. The pain is unimaginable, yet the soul cannot die, cannot faint, cannot rest. The blessed tear not only flashed, but the illusion of time, making each second feel like an eternity. What makes 𝐾𝐿 uniquely horrifying is that each weapon is born from the victim's own karma. The number of cuts, the style of pain, the rhythm of agony, all are shaped by the sins they committed in life. A liar who caused gore with swords may be gagged and slashed in the mouth. A traitor may find themselves internally pierced through the heart again and again, each time reliving the betrayal they once inflicted. Occasionally, the condemned are thrown into great arenas of iron, where they are forced to battle one another under the orders of the demonic overlord. The cruel inversions of those states, where even self-defense become another source of karmic bondage. Those who refuse to fight are trumped by monstrous war beasts, while those who kill others in desperation feel their own wounds multiply tenfold, echoing the cause and effect nature of karmic law. However, in the furthest corners of this blood-scarred hell, there are whispers of ancient bodhisattvas whose compassionate voice occasionally shine through, appearing like brief reflection in the place themselves. Tiny flashes of light that, if truly seen and understood by the soul, may plant the seed of repentance. Only through sincere remorse, an awakening of conscience in the heart of torment, can a soul even begin to hope for liberation from 𝐾𝐿. But until that moment, the sound of clashing metal, the screams of torn flesh, and the endless cycle of karmic pleasure will be the only reality the damned can know. The hell of the soul is the fifth level hell, Tamisra. The fifth level of the Buddhist hell is known as Tamisra, the hell of the soul, a place of suffocating darkness and excruciating dismemberment, where the punishment is not merely physical, but profoundly psychological, designed for those whose karma was rooted in greed, treachery, theft, betrayal, and exploitation of others for personal gain. Tamisra is not illuminated by fire or lightning, rather it is a realm of absolute, oppressive blackness, where the damned cannot see even their own hands, and the source of the unspeakable pain that tears through them. In this eerie void, souls are blindfolded by the karma of their own deceit, stripped of clarity and plunged into the sensory abyss, where every scream echoes like thunder and every breath tastes of iron and ash. Their punishment begins not with fire, but with a slow, grinding horror. They are sighted by unseen demonic figures who emerge soundlessly from the dark and led up on massive slabs of stone when their bodies are systematically sawed in half, not once but over and over again by gigantic serrated swords wielded by quivering skeletal hands guided by karmic force. The swords used in Tamisra are not ordinary tools. They are made from the spiritual remnants of the victims, own stolen goods and broken promises, each tooth on the blade sharpened by the cries of those they betray in life. Some places are heated white hot, while others are coated in poison or enchanted with spells that intensify suffering a thousandfold. As the sinner's body is torn apart slowly, from the scroll down to the groin, they keep conscious, aware, unable to move or scream, paralyzed by the karmic weight of their actions. The sword cuts through not just flesh, but memory and ego. Each past exposing a new layer of guilt and regret. The pain is magnified by the isolation. In Tamisra, no sinner can see another, though the sounds of other suffering surround them, creating a maddening symphony of anguish in the internal night. Tamisra is a realm ruled not by fire or force, but by silent, fierce, and unseen violence. There are no visible demons in many sections, only the sensation of roasted flesh pulling across bone and the choking smell of blood and rot in the air. At times, the souls are suspended in mid-air, dragged apart by chains wrapped around their limbs, as ghostly swords rip them from poses and, like sacrificed, strut between their greed and their will. In other chambers, the damned are trapped in narrow tunnels and forced to crawl to get the self of relief, only to be sliced in half by a horizontal blast imparted in the worst, struck by the weight of their own movements. And for those who stole from the vulnerable, the elderly, the poor, and the sick, the souls often take the shape of the very tools they used in life. Lectures, knife, contracts, or coins, now transform into weapons of divine retribution. Yet, despite the overwhelming darkness and pain, Tamisra is still part of the karmic cycle, and even here, redemption remains possible, though it is buried deep beneath mountains of suffering. In the rarest of moments, a sinner may reflect sincerely on their wrongdoings, not out of self-pity, but out of authentic sorrow for the harm they caused. And that single thought of repentance can shine like a distant star in the black skies of Tamisra. If nourished, it may grow into a flame bright enough to pierce the veil of illusion and lead the soul eventually out of this hell. But until that awakening, the condemned must endure the unrelenting rhythm of the sword, slicing, grinding, dividing, teaching through agony the consequences of deceit, selfishness, and betrayal, as they wander silently through the shadows of their own making. Next, we will come to the hell of the hot iron. The sixth level of the Buddhist house is Lohapasala, the hell of the hot iron, a place where the very foundations of torment are forged in molten metal, and searing agony, reserved for those whose sins were rooted in blasphemy, hatred of virtue, defilement of sacred spaces, and cruelty toward spiritual beings or teaching. That is a domain where the punishment is inflicted not only upon the body, but upon the moral essence of the soul, branding it with the fire of its own unreverence or hatred. As one descends into Lohapasala, the air grows heavier and thicker, reeking of smoke, scorched blood, and the acrid strand of molten iron, until the dam falls into a vast subterranean world, where rivers of liquid metal flow like lava, and mountains of glowing red iron rise like tombstones to karmic justice. Here, the condemned are stripped naked and chained to blazing iron pillars that burn without consuming, a reflection of their unrepentant hatred for truth and compassion, their skin purpled and mouths only to be restored by karmic force, so the torment may repeat for countless lifetimes. Demonic blacksmiths, immense and impressionist, tirelessly hammer the dam upon anvils of glowing bronze, reshaping them into tools of their own punishment. Some are made into red-hot roast and rolled over others. Some are turned into plants used to mock fellow sinners. while others are stretched into iron cysts and folded again and again under hammers fueled by the weight of their transgressions. The ground itself in Lohapatala is a griddle heated from below by subterranean flame, so that every step charged the feet and every fall resulted in full-body immolation. The sky is a vault of iron plates that drip molten slag, and occasionally slip open with explosive forks to rain down blazing metal, such like fire rain, slicing through the crowds of screaming souls. Plates of green, made of microscopic iron needles, flay the skin of anyone who dares to beg for mercy. In this hell, the soul's hatred and aggression are used as fuel, attracting chains of burning metal that coil around the body like serpents, crushing and scoring simultaneously. What distinguishes Lohapatala from other levels of Naraka is its emphasis on punishment for forging, a metaphor for how hatred and blasphemy twist and deform the soul. Those who mock the Dharma, scorn the Buddha, and destroy temples and scriptures are often nailed to iron slabs and roasted slowly, with each nail corresponding to a moment of intentional disrespect. Others are fed molten iron as drink and food, which burns through their throats and stomach while leaving their consciousness intact, forcing them to endure internal fire that mirrors their spiritual corruption. Priests who defied their duties, monks who led others astray, and false teachers who used sacred words for personal gain are tormented by sentient plants that carve their lives into their flesh for all eternity. Yet, in the endless screaming and infernal clanging of Lohapatala, there are occasional silences, moments when the soul, overwhelmed by torment, ceases to resist and begins to reflect. If a glimmer of humility arises, if the sinner remembers the teaching they once mocked or feels a symbol of remorse, that tiny spark of clarity may become a karmic key, unlocking the first door to liberation. However, for most, Lohapatala is a nearly inescapable hell, where the reformation of the spirit is as slow and grueling as the forcing of steel, and where each moment is a fiery sermon on the consequences of desecration, aggression, and spiritual betrayal. Until the lessons are learned and the karmic debt repaid, the soul remains bound to the furnace of divine thirsty, endlessly reshaped by the hammer of its own sins. Raurava is the seventh level hell, the hell of black sand. Seventh level hell is a desolate and merciless wasteland where punishment comes in the form of searing winds, blistering sand, and illusions that tear the soul apart, reserved for those who committed great sins through envy, malice, deceit, and manipulation that caused widespread suffering. Raurava is unlike the fire or metallic torments of the previous levels. It is a realm of burning desolation, endless dunes of black, razor sharp sin, and cruel illusion that reflect the sinner's darkness nature. The black sand here is not ordinary. It is composed of pulverized obsidian, fragments of certain vows, and the dust of souls long extinguished, and it burns hotter than fire under the merciless, blood-red sun that never sets. When a sinner arrives in Raurava, they are immediately stripped bare and forced to crawl across the smoldering dunes, where each grain of sand slices the flesh and scorches the bone, embedding itself under the skin like glowing needles. The deeper they move, and the more the path becomes a nightmare of shifting terrain, phantom mirrors of relief, draw them forward, only to vanish and leave them exposed in endless torment. The winds of Gaurava are ceaseless and scream with the voice of those who once whisper lies and shout chaos in the world of both. These winds hurl in burning black sand with the force of knife, flaying the skin from the damned, peeling muscle from bone, then healing them again so the torment can repeat internally. Deceivers and slanderers who manipulated others for personal gain are targeted most severely. They are often chased by monstrous skeletal beasts made of sand and ash, born from the very relationships they destroy in life. Each beast beating and tearing with the weight of karmic retribution. Unlike the more straightforward torments of lower hells, Gaurava assault the mind with vivid hallucinations. The souls see their victims in the sand, crying out for their state, accusing them with eyes full of pain, only to vanish in a world of scrolling dust, leaving the sinner sobbing and crawling toward nothingness. Demonic wonders in Gaurava are cloaked in black robes that sip like smoke, and they wield no weapons. For here, the environment itself is the executioner. The sand invests the body, filling the mouth, eyes, and lungs, burning from within, and yet never suffocating the soul entirely. In one of Gaurava's most infamous regions, called the Valley of Streak, the damned are forced to walk barefoot across hot coals buried beneath razor dunes, while illusions of their own betrayal, spouses they lied to, friends they backstabbed, children they manipulated, appear beside them, screaming, weeping, and accusing in voice that echo louder with every step. This mental anguish fuses with the physical, creating a torment that fractures identity itself. Some lose all memory of who they are, becoming crawling sweat who repeat their sins in murmurs, tormented by the very echoes of their deceit. And yet, even in the blistering despair of Gaurava, there lies a faint and hidden opportunity for salvation. Those who recognize the illusions for what they are, manifestation of their own ego and past cruelty, may begin to dissolve the karmic force that binds them. If true remorse arises, if they cry not for themselves but for those they hurt, a single grain of black sand may cool, and from it may rise a fleeting vision of the Dharma, a chain, however slight, for rebirth into a world where they can walk the path of correction. But for most, Gaurava is an endless desert of good and pain, where even the hope of water burns the tongue and every horizon is a mirage of regret, punishing those who poison truth, trust, and harmony in the world above. The 8th level of Buddhist Hell is Mahagaurava, known as the Hell of the Great Boiling Cauldron, a horrifying rift where karmic retribution manifests in vast oceans of boiling liquid, blood, frost, molten gold, acidic fire, and blistering oil, bubbling and seething with the anguish of those who in life embraced insatiable greed, sadistic cruelty, and the calculated infliction of long-term suffering on others. This level is not merely punishment, it is karmic exposure, where the soul is laid bare and boiled in the very essence of its corruption. Sinners who profited from others' misery, who built empires on exploitation, who betrayed love for gain, or inflicted pain to maintain power, all fall into Mahagaurava. There the sun begins the spectral chains fork from their midst, dragging them down through howling tunnels of steam and sorrow, until they are heard screaming into gigantic cauldrons. The sight of cities filled with flushed tailored precisely to the karmic signature of their sins. These cauldrons are suspended over internal flames, stoked by tireless demonic smiths. The limbs are fused with black metal, and whose mouths chant endless curses in languages older than time. Each sinner's experience is terrifyingly unique. The greedy are boiled in molten gold, which clings to their flesh and invests their organs like liquid fire, mocking the wealth they once worshipped. The deceitful throw in public beach, the tongues seared from the mouth, only to regenerate and burn again. The exploiters of children or the helpless are flung into cauldrons of burning ashes, surrounded by ghostly cries that echo the victim's suffering. And the cold-hearted, those who acted with cruelty under the weight of rationality, are lowered slowly into vats of boiling iron, their skins sloughing up inch by inch, while the rural demons, hideous hybrid beasts with fire-breathing muzzles and claws made from sharpened bone, stand watch, ensuring no one dies too quickly. The fire beneath each cauldron is fueled by the sinner's own karmic energy, growing hotter as their growth intensifies, and every scream fuels the next row of agony. The fluid invests every orifice, mouth, eyes, nose, ears, and boils the soul from the inside out, but the victim never dies. Instead, they are constantly regenerated, so that the suffering may continue, each moment repeating like a karmic echo again and again for countless eons. The environment around Mahararava is no less nightmarish. The air is thick with black steam, sulfurous fumes, and straight so piercing they fracture the mind. The sky is a dome of dark red clouds and turning smoke that rains down droplets of liquid flame. Every few moments, phantoms rise from the cauldrons, visions of the damned former life, people they betrayed, children they ruled, families they tore apart, on appearing as spectral witnesses who watch and grieve, or worse, laugh. The psychological torment is as great as the physical. Each soul is forced to relieve their cruelties from the perspective of the victims, feeling what they inflicted, hearing the cries they ignore, seeing the subtle life left behind. These moments do not bring comfort. They intensify the boiling, feeding the cauldron with wave of weight that scald more deeply than fire ever could. And yet, though Mahararava is nearly impossible to endure, it is still not a place of internal damnation, for even in its depth, the law of impermanence and karma remains. The path to escape lies not in struggle, but in transformation. Some souls, after eons of suffering, cease resisting and begin reflecting, not in selfish desperation, but in genuine recognition of their wickedness. When a sinner acknowledges the full weight of their cruelty and with a hope of reward, feels true remorse, a single drop within their cauldron may turn cool. That is the first sign of karmic loosening, a subtle shift in energy that draws the attention of celestial guardians. If that spark grows, if the soul begins to seek not relief but atonement, it may rise slowly through the boiling tide, lifted by its own contrition. But such redemption is rare. For most, Mahararava remains a reef of relentless purification through pain, a crucible where the soul is boiled until lies and delusion are stripped away, and only truth, raw, searing, undeniable truth remains. The ninth level of Buddhist hell is Tabbana, the hell of crossing by mountain, an unimaginable brutal rift where the soul's every transgression is repaid not just in fire or acid, but with the full, inescapable weight of its karmic burden, manifested in the form of titanic mountains that cross the body and spirit endlessly, reserved for those who live with unyielding pride, arrogant domination over the weak, and a will to oppress without compassion. Tabana is where the ego is shattered, literally, under layers of merciless pressure. Upon entry, the sinner finds themselves standing upon a narrow ledge, surrounded by darkness and wind, high in a cold range of black, just mountain that pierced the sky and tremble with unseen forces. Without warning, the very ground splits, and from above stands an immense mountain fort, not of stone, but of solidified karma, a symbolic mask made up of the very deeds, lies, and abuse committed in life. This mountain does not fall suddenly. It moves with deliberate, crushing certainty, pressing the soul down with inexorable force, splintering bones, flattening organs, pulverizing flesh, but never allowing death. In Tabana, there is no relief. One crushed, the sinner's body reforms slowly, only to be crushed again from different angles, at varying speeds and with varying intensities. Each cycle designed by karmic law to reflect the pain they cause others through psychological and physical oppression. Some are laid flat beneath slabs the size of continents, that screams muffled by the tone of karmic weight, while others are hung between moving peaks that grind together slowly, scrubbing away the bodies millimeters by millimeters. The mountains themselves are alive with hate, the hate the sinner once radiated, and whisper their transgression back to them in endless, echoing voice that bow from peak to peak like thunder. You mock the poor, crushed. You probe the spirit of those beneath you, crushed. You believe you would never fall, crushed. The pain is not only physical, it is existential, a total annihilation of ego, as the sinner are reduced to a wrecking speck beneath the weight of every unrepentant cruelty they ever enacted. The guardians of Tabana are massive stone giants, fused with the mountain itself, whose arms and hands push the peak together with mechanical precision. These beings do not speak or gloat. They are silent executor of divine law, their eyes burning with pure fire, their movements steady and absolute. Between crushing cycles, they drag the sinner through narrow ravines littered with subtle remains of other souls, then place them once again upon an altar of granite to resume the process. The air is thin, freezing and filled with the road of grinding rope and pricking bodies, and even the wind carries gravel soft enough to tear flesh. Sometimes Tabana presents a cruel illusion, a moment of stillness, a glimpse of sky, a feeling of escape. Thus before the next mountain descends, heavier than before, crushing hope as truly as the flesh. And yet, even in this pit of total devastation, the potential of transformation remains. The mountains crushed but do not cool. They strip away illusion, shatter delusion, and expose the naked soul beneath its own presence. In rare moments, a sinner may stop struggling, not from exhaustion, but from a deep inner recognition of truth. If the soul abandons pride, confesses its evil not with the sleep, but with the heart, and it removes wealth off from a place untouched by fear or desperation, the mountains may momentarily pause. In that pause, a tiny wind may stir, a signal that the weight has begun to lessen, ever so slightly. That is the first breath of liberation. Until then, Tappana remains an internal mountain range of karma, where the once mighty are proud, love, where the cruel are humble not by judgment, but by the terrible justice of their own deeds, return to them 1,000-fold, one crossing moment at a time. The 10th and deepest level of Buddhist Hell is 𝐷𝐵𝐶, known as the Hell of Endless Darkness, a place so desolate and profound in its torment that it represents the ultimate consequence of unrepentant evil, where the soul is plunged into internal isolation, suffering, and oblivion. This level hell is reserved for those whose life were marked by the most heinous sins, cold-blooded murderers, those who deliberately destroy life and hope, and beings who acted with absolute cruelty and malice without remorse. Unlike the fiery or crushing torments of the higher hells, 𝐷𝐵𝐶's punishment is psychological and existential, a powerless void where light, warmth, and hope are utterly extinguished. The soul is cast into a bottomless pit, an infinite abyss cloaked in impenetrable blackness that crushes the spirit with the weight of solitude and despair. Here there is no sound except the hollow echo of one's own suffering thoughts, no movement except the slow decay of consciousness, and no escape from the crushing loneliness. In this level hell, the condemned exist in a state of perpetual mental torment, reliving their worst actions and the pain they caused others in endless torturous cycle, and without any external physical pain to distract or release them. The absence of all sensation is itself a punishment, like drowning in the sea of darkness where the soul's very essence is eroded by despair and hopelessness. Time lost meaning here, moments stretched into eternities, and suffering is felt with a cruel sadness that never dawns. The soul is trapped within layers of its own guilt and hatred, unable to find peace or forgiveness, while the darkness closed in like a suffocating shroud that blocks even the faintest glimmers of compassion or light. Unlike the other hells, there are no demons or physical tortures, only the overwhelming endless weight of isolation and the inescapable knowledge of one's irredeemable past. This hell is described as the most severe because it is the absolute end of the cycle of rebirth until the soul exhausts its negative karma. In Buddhist cosmology, even the endless darkness is impermanent, though its duration is so vast. It may span countless eons beyond human comprehension. The only hope for release from 𝐷𝐵𝐶 lies in the gradual, painstaking transformation of the soul from within through the extinguishing of ignorance and the arising of profound insight. When the soul finally confronts the full truth of its action and awakens to the possibility of compassion, no longer clinging to selfishness or cruelty, the darkness may begin to live, allowing the soul to ascend and begin a new cycle of rebirth, often in lower realms where it can work toward purification and enlightenment. Until that moment, 𝐷𝐵𝐶 remains a silent abyss, the deepest and most terrifying of all Buddhist hells, where the ultimate price of unrepented evil is paid in the currency of endless, absolute emptiness. Though traditionally Buddhist cosmology speaks of 8 or 10 hells, some expanded teachings describe additional realms, such as the 11th level hell, Hahava, known as the hell of frozen coal, a terrifying domain of relentless, bone-chilling cold that punishes souls for sins rooted in cruelty and cold-heartedness by turning their suffering inward through extreme frostbite and internal numbness. In Ahava, the air is a swirling tempest of icy wind, and the landscape is a bleak expanse of endless glacier, jagged ice cliff, and frozen grassland, illuminated only by a ghostly pale light that casts long, cold shadow. Here, souls are trapped in a state of immobilizing cold that penetrates beyond flesh and bone, freezing their very essence and extinguishing any spark of warmth or compassion they might have once possessed. Unlike the fiery torment of lower hell, Ahava's cruelty lies in its absolute deprivation. The cold isolates the soul in a frozen prison of stillness and silence where movement itself becomes agonizing. The condemned are subjected to endless storm of sharp eyes that tear at their skin, their bodies slowly encased in layers of glacial frost that crush organs and crack bones with every severing breath. Demonic frost spirits with crystalline claws and frozen eyes roam this dream, tearing at the frozen flesh and inflicting endless thrills that cause the soul pain to amplify in every nerve and fever. Souls experience the bitter sting of abandonment, left alone in vast, icy plains where their cries for mercy freeze on the air and dissolve into silence. The cold penetrates into the mind, causing hallucination of isolation and despair so vivid they trap the soul further in a cycle of torment, reliving moments of cold indifference and cruelty they inflicted upon others in life. This hell, the punishment corresponds karmically to the sinner's action. Those who cause others to suffer through emotional neglect, betrayal, or cold manipulation find their hurt eyes over, unable to feel or reach out, while those who harmed others through callousness and violence endure the physical reality of frostbite that never heals. The freezing is relentless and death is impossible. Bodies reform slowly within the ice, only to be shattered and frozen anew. The internal chill suppresses all hope and desire, turning the soul into a statue of ice, forever trapped in a moment of frozen agony. Despite its overwhelming coldness, Ahava is not beyond the law of karma. Even to a balance, the soul's suffering can eventually kindle a faint internal warmth, a spark of true remorse or compassion that can melt the icy prison bit a bit, releasing the soul into realms where it can begin healing and spiritual renewal. Until then, Ahava remains a plague kingdom of frost and silence, where the cold-hearted are condemned to feel the full, numbing weight of their own chill and an internal wither of the soul. The hell of great hunger and thirst is the following level hell. The 12th and one of the most harrowing levels of hell in expanded Buddhist cosmology is the hell of great hunger and thirst, where souls endure an unending torment of insatiable craving, symbolizing the karmic punishment for life starved in great gluttony, selfishness, and spiritual starvation. This hell is not merely a place of physical suffering, but a profound psychological and existential agony, a barren wasteland that mirrors the soul's deepest emptiness and the futility of desire. The landscape of this level stretches infinitely, a desolate desert scorched by a merciless sun that drains all moisture and life, littered with cracked earth, sharp stones, and ghostly sandstorms that weave endlessly through the air. The sky above is a relentless blaze of white-hot light, blinding and enduring, leaving no shelter or respite from the burning dryness that permeates every corner of this realm. The souls condemned wander ceaselessly, driven by an agonizing thirst and a hunger that was at their very being, yet no nourishment can be found. They stumble across simmering oases, pools of crystal clear water, and grow heavy with drift, swollen visions so vivid and tantalizing that hope briefly sparked within them, only to have this illusion dissolve instantly upon approach, leaving behind nothing but dust and silence. This cruel cycle of temptation and loss feeds the torment, a karmic reflection of their earthly life, where they chase after material wealth, pleasures, or power with insatiable desire, but never found true fulfillment or generosity. The pain of deprivation is amplified by the sharp sting of this mirage, as well as the soul's growing desperation and isolation. Within this dream, demonic beings known as suras, grotesque, hybrid with twisted limbs and ravenous eyes, stalk the damned. They delight in intensifying suffering by teasing souls with fleeting glimpses of food and water, simmering lakes, bubbling spring, lavish feast, and then snatching this away with cruel laughter, ensuring the hope remains that out of trick. These tormentors also use instruments crafted from dry bones and cracked gold, striking the souls to drive them on God in their endless wandering, as if to prevent any chance of rest or peace. The cold winds that blow across the desert carry the echoes of Christ, whispers of regret, the screams of unfulfilled desire, and the grunts of starvation. Each sound a reminder of the suffering self-inflicted by attachment and selfishness. Karmic tailoring of punishment in the 12-level hell, precise and deeply symbolic. Those who in life hoarded wealth and resources, allowing others to starve or suffer, experienced a hunger so acute it tears at their stomach with every breath. Those who indulge in gluttony and sensual excess endure thirst so suffer that their tongues swell and crack, yearning internally for relief. Those who deceive or betray others to gain material advantage find their desires mocked by constant hallucinations of banquet tables laden with food that dissolves into dust before they can partake. Even the bodies of the damned, though ravaged by hunger or thirst, are sustained by karmic energy that prevents death, forcing an internal cycle of regeneration and suffering. The physical pain plants with mental anguish, where the soul's awareness fractures under the stress of unmet need and craving, plunging it into despair, madness, and hopelessness. The environment itself adds to the torment, withstand storms so fierce they scald the skin and erode any remnants of flesh, while the scorching sun plies and burns without mercy. At night, the temperature plunges sharply, exposing souls to freezing cold that numbs their senses and intensify their suffering. The relentless extreme symbolize the instability and unpredictability of craving. The soul's journey swings between the unbearable heat of desire and the freezing emptiness of denial, trapped in an internal cycle that mirrors the endless suffering caused by attachment in life. Yet, despite the overwhelming torment, this level is not internal in the absolute sense. The law of karma dictates that this purgatory exists to exhaust and purify the soul's attachments, no matter how deep-rooted they may be. Over vast eons, some soul reach a breaking point where the futility of desire becomes clear, not through external force, but by the soul's own dawning awareness. This awakening begins with the quiet recognition that craving leads only to suffering and that true nourishment can come only from letting go, from generosity, compassion, and spiritual renunciation. As this insight takes root, the mirrors lose their power, the hunger and thirst subside, and the soul's endless wandering slows. The ice of craving begins to thaw, allowing the soul to move beyond this level, often reborn into lower realms where it can cultivate virtues of giving and selflessness to repair the karmic damage inflicted in past life. Until that moment of transformation, however, this level remains a merciless wasteland of craving, a profound cosmic reminder that unchecked desire and selfishness not only devastate others, but ultimately imprison the soul is an unending result of suffering, where the thirst for fulfillment can never be quenched, and the hunger for meaning remains forever unfulfilled. The 13th level of hell, Vatarani, known as the hell of disembowelment, is one of the most horrifying and brutal realms of torment within Buddhist cosmology, where souls endure excruciating punishment for the reverse karmas of violence, cruelty, and the seeking of life. This hell is dominated by a vast, tumultuous river of boiling, scorching blood that churns with relentless fury, stretching endlessly under a blood-red sky. The damned are forced to wade through this torrent, their bodies repeatedly torn apart as razor-sharp instruments, and demonic creatures viciously disembowel and mutilate them, exposing their entrails and leaving them in endless cycles of agony. The river's blood burns like molten fire, searing both flesh and spirit, while the constant tearing of infernal organs symbolize the irreversible spiritual destruction caused by violence and malice in life. Those condemned here are typically murderers, torturers, and others who inflicted grave physical suffering on sentient beings. The hell's atmosphere is suffocating and filled with the anguished screams of soul caught in internal torment, echoed by the howling winds and the rout of the boiling blood. Demonic wantons, with cruel visage and weapons forged from black iron, patrol the riverbanks to ensure that no soul escapes punishment. They inflict fresh wounds upon the suffering souls, intensifying the pain as the victim bodies are continually reassembled by karmic forces only to be torn apart again and again. This endless cycle of death and reanimation reflects the inescapable karmic consequences of violent actions and the spiritual fragmentation such cruelty causes. Beyond the physical torment, tyranny also represents profound psychological suffering. Souls are overwhelmed by remorse and terror, trapped in a hellish reality that reflects that destructive impact they cause to others. The environment itself, barren, lifeless, and soaked in blood, mirrors the void of compassion and humanity in the condemned. Despite its merciless nature, Buddhist doctrine teaches that this hell is not internal. It is a realm for purifying the worst karmic depths. Through the suffering endured here, the soul gradually exhausts its negative karma. Only when this process completes can the soul move on, freed from Vatarani's horrors, and begin the slow journey of healing, rebirth, and spiritual growth. Until that time, the hell of disembowelment stands as a terrifying testament to the devastating consequences of violence and the inescapable loss of karmic justice. The 14th level hell, or the hell of blood and flesh, stands as one of the most gruesome and relentless streams of torment within the intricate Buddhist cosmology of the 18th house. It is a place where the karmic consequences of cruelty, betrayal, violent harm, and profound malice manifest in excruciating physical and spiritual suffering. The very air in hell is thick with the corporeal sense of fresh blood, mingled with the stench of rotting flesh, creating a suffocating atmosphere that mirrors the unbearable pain and despair endured by its inhabitants. The landscape is a plague, nightmarish expanse, littered with jagged bones, shattered limbs, and pools of coagulated, dark crimson blood on under a sky perpetually stained with hues of purged purple and angry red, as if reflecting the internal anguish below. In this hell, the damned souls are subjected to ceaseless mutilation. Their flesh is torn and shredded repeatedly by invisible but merciless forces, leaving open wounds that never closed. Their blood flows endlessly, shaking the ground beneath their feet, while every movement causes fresh cuts and agonizing pain. This endless cycle of destruction and pleading symbolize the karmic retribution for the grievous sins they committed in life, sins of violence, betrayal, and merciless cruelty inflicted upon others. It is said that these souls relieve the suffering they caused, their torment magnified by the vivid memories of their misdeeds, which haunt their consciousness as relentlessly as their physical pain. Their agony is not only corporeal but deeply psychological, as feelings of guilt, remorse, and despair fester and grow within them, fitting an unbreakable cycle of suffering. The demonic wonders of this hell are terrifying figures with claw-like sides and eyes burning with a fire hunger for pain. They tear into the soul's flesh, dragging their victims through thorny brambles and over sharp ropes that stretch skin and muscle alike. These tormentors work tirelessly to ensure the punishment is unending and inescapable, using instruments forged from black iron and bone to rake across body and rip open wounds anew. The cries of the damned echo endlessly through the hellscape, a dreadful chorus of suffering that underscores that hell's merciless nature. Beyond the physical torment, the level hell serves as a profound symbol of the spiritual consequences of cruelty and hatred. The endless flow of blood and the perpetual tearing of flesh represent not only bodily harm, but the destruction of the soul's integrity and compassion, the very essence that binds beings to harmony and peace. In this way, this level is a mirror reflecting the spiritual void created by life lived in malice and violence, where empathy and kindness have been forsaken. Yet, despite its terrifying intensity, the hell of blood and flesh is not eternal. According to Buddhist teachings, all hells are impermanent states meant for karmic purification. The immense suffering in this hell serves to exhaust the negative karma accumulated through violent and cruel actions over unimaginably long cycles. As the soul endures and learns from its torment, the karmic debts are gradually paid, allowing the soul to eventually be freed from this hell. Liberation from this hell offers a chance for rebirth in more favorable realms where healing, compassion, and spiritual growth become possible. Until such release, however, this level hell means a grim testament to the deep and painful consequences of hatred and violence. It is a realm where the boundaries between body and soul dissolve into a constant flood of blood and agony, a stark warning that cruelty inflicted upon others inevitably returns to wound the self, and that true peace arises only from compassion, kindness, and respect for all living beings. The 15th level of hell, known as Padma, or the hell of boiling oil, is a fearsome and relentless domain of suffering reserved for those who in their earthly life committed grave sin rooted in deceit, greed, and malevolent intent. This hell vividly embodies the karmic consequences of such destructive behaviors, manifesting in a brutal punishment that reflects the corrosive nature of dishonesty and selfishness on both others and the soul itself. Padma is dominated by vast, rolling pools of thick, fiery boiling oil, which glow with a terrifying red-orange hue beneath a sky perpetually darkened by smoke and ash. The oppressive heat radiating from these pools scorches barren land around them, cracking the earth and twisting the jagged ropes into grotesque shapes that seem to writhe with the suffering they witness. Souls condemned to Padma are repeatedly plunged into this scourging death, their bodies seared, blistered, and burnt without respite. Yet, by the force of karma, their flesh regenerates only to be subjected again to the unending flames of the boiling oil. This unending cycle of destruction and renewal symbolized the way that lies, greed, and betrayal corrode the essence of light and truth, forcing the soul to endure the spiritual burning caused by the poisonous nature of their actions. Each emotion is accompanied by agonizing cries that pierce the thick, arid air and haunting chorus of torment that underscores the severity of this punishment. The demonic wonders of Padma are cruel and tireless, wielding hoops and chains forged from blackened iron, dragging the damned from one pool to another, ensuring no soul escape their fiery fate. These tormentors seem fueled by the very hatred and bitterness generated by the sinful deeds of their damned, reflecting the karmic justice where malevolent energy perpetuates suffering. The soul's mental anguish intensifies as they relive the countless ways that deceit and greed cause pain to others. The guilt and regret burning as fiercely as the bodies in the molten oil. This dual torment of body and mind reveals the holistic nature of karmic retribution, the inescapable link between physical suffering and spiritual purification. Beyond the pools of oil, the landscape of Padma offers no solace. The sky is thick with dark clouds swirling with embers, casting flickering shadows that dance like tortured spirits. The constant roar of boiling oil and the anguished screams of the punished souls create an unending cacophony, a grim symphony of karmic justice in action. Despite the unimaginable cruelty of this hell, Buddhist doctrine teaches that Padma is impermanent. It functions as a karmic crucible designed to exhaust the heavy negative karma generated by deceitful and greedy behavior. Over vast eons, as the soul endures and learns from its pain, the karmic bonds begin to loosen. Eventually, the soul's capacity for remorse and transformation may lead it to be released from the fire pools, reborn into realms where healing, compassion, and selflessness can be cultivated. Therefore, while Padma is a realm of intense suffering, it is also a place of purification, a stark reminder that the flames of karma are both destructive and ultimately purifying. Until such liberation occurs, the hell of boiling oil remains a fire abyss that vividly illustrates the destructive power of dishonesty and selfishness. a searing warning that actions rooted in greed and deceit will inevitably consume the perpetrator in their own flames, making this hell both a prison and a path to a spiritual awakening. The 16th level of hell, or the hell of broken bones, is a brutal and unforgiving realm where souls are punished for their violent deaths, especially those involving cruelty, physical abuse, and the destruction of others' bodies. This hell is marked by a desolate landscape strewn with shattered bones, splintered skulls, and jagged ropes that serve as both instruments and symbols of the torment inflicted within. The air is thick with dust and the echoing sounds of bones snapping and bodies breaking, a horrifying symphony of suffering that reverberates endlessly through the barren wasteland. In this level hell, them are subjected to relentless physical punishment, where the bones are repeatedly broken, shattered, and crushed by animal stone hammers wielded by merciless demonic guardians. The torment is cyclical. Thus, as the bones begin to heal, the punishment begins anew, inflicting unbearable pain and highlighting the karmic consequences of violence and physical cruelty. This continual breaking symbolizes the deep spiritual fracture caused by harmful action, emphasizing how violent death not only damaged others but also shatter the integrity of one's own soul. The demonic tormentors, fierce and unyielding, pattern this hell with grim determination, wielding colossal clubs and iron chains to inflict maximum suffering. Their merciless assault leaves no respite, and the screams of agony from the condemned souls echo endlessly, creating an atmosphere heavy with despair and anguish. The souls experience not only the raw physical pain of shattered bones, but also the crushing weight of remorse and regret, trapped in ceaseless cycle of destruction and renewal that reflects the karmic depths. The barren wasteland surrounding the hell of broken bones is a stark reminder of the devastation wrought by violence. There is no life, no hope, only ruin and suffering. However, as with all hells in Buddhist teachings, this level hell is not internal. It serves as a place of karmic purification, where the soul must exhaust the negative karma accumulated through violent acts before it can move on to a new existence. Through the harsh and relentless suffering of this hell, souls come to confront the true consequences of their actions, learning that violence fractures not only the bodies of others, but also their own path to spiritual peace. Only when this painful karmic cycle is complete can the soul be freed to begin a journey toward healing, compassion, and even to a liberation from the endless suffering of the hell dreams. The 17th level of hell, or the hell of endless screams, is one of the most harrowing and psychologically tormenting realms in the 18th house, where the souls of the wicked are condemned to an existence dominated by relentless auditory suffering. Unlike the house where physical pain is the primary punishment, this dream inflicts a kind of torment that exhausts the very mind and spirit through the unceasing parade of anguish screams. The hellscape itself is an eerie wasteland, shrouded in perpetual gloom, where stars twist and coil as if alive, and the sky above is forever cloaked in dense, swirling gray clouds that blot out any hint of light and hope. In this oppressive environment, the cries of the damned ring out without pause, piercing, shrill, and utterly inescapable. The souls imprisoned in this hell are those whose lives are marked by hatred, cruelty, malice, and destructive spirit. Words that inflicted pain, so destroy truth and harmony. The punishment here manifests as a constant auditory assault that stresses their sanity and magnifies their inner torment. Each scream they hear is both their own and the echoed suffering of countless others, the haunting reminder of the wounds, the harmful words and hateful emotion inflicted. This endless chorus of screams reverberates through the barren plains, ricocheting off jagged roads, leafless trees that seem to quiver and whisper in response, as if the very landscape is alive with suffering. The mental and emotional anguish experienced in this hell far surpasses physical pain. Souls are trapped in a state of heightened awareness, unable to escape the relentless noise that throws on thoughts of peace and hope. The screams represent not only external punishment, but the internalized growth and remorse that plague those who harm others through emotional cruelty, deceitful speech, or hatred. Every moment is a vicious cycle of auditory horror and self-recrimination, as the damned are forced to confront the emotional destruction they wrought in life, echoed back to them in infinite repetition. These house tormentors are less visible but no less cruel, acting as amplifiers of suffering rather than direct physical punishers. They waste the souls of anguish into an unbreakable web of torment, ensuring that the damned cannot find respite even in silence. The constant noise erodes the mind's defenses, pushing souls toward despair and madness. The environment itself seems designed to magnify the psychological torment. With whole life passes, carrying stress, fire, and wine, while the penis seems to tremble in time with the Christ, creating an overwhelming sensory experience of dread. Despite the overwhelming and seemingly internal suffering in the hell of endless screams, Buddhist teaching emphasizes impermanence. This hell is not a place of internal damnation, but a karmic purgatory where souls pay the price for emotional cruelty, verbal harm, and the hatred they foster in life. The relentless auditory torment serves to exhaust the karmic depths incurred by these actions, cleansing the soul through suffering and reflection. Only after the soul has been fully purified of these karmic impurities can it escape the cacophony and progress toward rebirth in a realm where healing and spiritual growth are possible. Ultimately, the health of endless screams stands as a profound warning about the power of words and emotions. It illustrates how harmful speech and destructive feelings, though invisible, leave deep wounds not only in others, but also within the soul of the perpetrator. Through enduring this haunting torment, souls are forced to confront the devastating impact of their action, and through this painful process, are given the opportunity to awaken to compassion, remorse, and the possibility of redemption. This level of hell is a stark reminder that the path to enlightenment demands mastery not only over actions, but also over the words and emotions that shape our relationship and the world around us. The 18th and deepest level of hell, known as 𝐷𝐸𝐺, or the hell of flaming pit, represents the ultimate realm of suffering and karmic retribution in Buddhist cosmology. This hell is feared above all others for its unrelenting, severe torment where the souls of the gravest sinners, those who committed the most heinous acts without remorse, are condemned to endure unimaginable pain. 𝐷𝐸𝐺 is often described as a vast, bottomless pit engulfed in searing flames that burn internally, with no possibility of escape or relief until the soul accumulated negative karma is fully exhausted. In 𝐷𝐸𝐺, the damned are trapped in a state of continuous torture, caught in flames that consume the body but never destroy it, ensuring an endless cycle of pain and suffering. The fiery pit is surrounded by jagged volcanic rocks and rivers of molten lava, radiating intense heat that scorches the very air, filling the hellscape with a suffocating atmosphere of agony. The flames symbolize the destructive power of unrestrained hatred, cruelty, and malicious intent, sin that serve the soul from any hope of peace or redemption. This hell is said to be the place where karmic consequences are most intense, reflecting the ultimate punishment for those whose life lived dominated by cruelty, murder, and profound spiritual corruption. The souls in 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐻 experience not only physical torment but also profound spiritual isolation and despair. The flaming pit is a prison of solitude, where no sound of comfort or hope can be heard, only the crackling of fire and the anguished screams of the damned. Demonic wardens, embodiments of relentless karmic justice, ensure that the punishment is administered without mercy, tracking souls through the flames again and again. Here, the endless burning is not merely a physical trial, but a purifying fire that strips away the accumulated defilement of the soul, allowing for even true transformation once the karmic debt has been fully paid. Despite the horror and seeming eternity of 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐻, Buddhist philosophy teaches that it is not a place of eternal damnation. Instead, it is a realm of profound purification, where even the most corrupt souls are given the opportunity, however distant, to cleanse their negative karma through suffering. After eons of torment, when the karmic consequences have been fully expiated, the soul may be reborn into other realms, continuing its journey toward enlightenment. 𝐷𝐸𝐺𝐻 thus stands as the most intense crucible of karma, a realm that embodies the stark truth of moral cause and effect, and the severest consequences of the most destructive human behaviors. In this final and most dreadful level of hell, the terrifying vision of the flaming pit serves as a powerful moral warning across Buddhist traditions, emphasizing the importance of compassion, ethical conduct, and mindfulness in one's action. It reminds all beings that the path of cruelty, hatred, and violence leads only to destruction and suffering, while the path of virtue and awakening offers the hope of liberation from even the darkest depths of karmic consequence. In conclusion, the 18 levels of hell, as depicted in Buddhist cosmology, serve not merely as terrifying realms of punishment, but as profound moral and spiritual teachings about the consequences of our thoughts, words, and actions. Each level symbolizes specific karmic retribution that correspond to the nature and severity of one's misdeeds, illustrating that negative actions inevitably lead to suffering, not only for others but also for oneself. These vivid and often gruesome punishments are metaphors for the internal and external consequences of harmful behavior, emphasizing the interconnectedness of all beings and the inescapable law of cause and effect. Beyond fears, the depiction of these helps guides practitioners toward ethical living, compassion, and mindfulness. They remind us that cruelty, greed, hatred, disease, and violence corrupt the soul and create the cycle of suffering that can persist across lifetimes. Yet, Buddhist teaching emphasize that no suffering is eternal. The hell realms are impermanent states of purification designed to exhaust negative karma. Through enduring this hardship, souls have the opportunity to learn, transform, and eventually transcend the cycle of birth and death. Spiritually, the 18 house highlights the necessity of personal responsibility and the transformative power of repentance and virtue. They inspire deep awareness of the impact of one's choices, encouraging a path of compassion, wisdom, and self-restraint that leads to God liberation and enlightenment. Ultimately, these teachings offer both a cautionary tale and a hopeful promise that while harmful actions bear severe consequences, sincere remorse and positive transformation can break the chains of suffering and open the way to spiritual freedom and lasting peace. Thank you for listening and join me in learning about the 18 levels of hell in Buddhism, terrifying realms of retribution. Please leave your comments, like this video and share it with others. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great Bible stories. Goodbye and see you in next videos.